welcome into this week's edition of With Sonar. I'm Tony Mulvey, not joined by Luke Velasca this week. He is out of town, but I do have a special guest, one of our own TV on-air talents here, Thomas Wasson, host of Loaded and Rolling. Thomas, how are you doing today?
Doing pretty well, Tony. We are at home today, unfortunately. Moral of the story is either don't go to Oktoberfest or don't eat steak tartare. So missing you in studio, of course, but super excited to be on the show and, just getting to dive into Sonar. We're in it every day, so it's fun to talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, this show is bringing that data kind of to life, and it's really an exciting show. And one, I'm really happy to have you on, but we have a special guest that's going to be joining us here a little while later. We've got CEO and founder of Emerge, Andrew Leto, joining us, and I really look forward to talking to him because they've done a lot of special things over there at Emerge. But we've been talking about this changing freight environment. And guess what? They're at the forefront of it. They see it day to day. So really excited to have that. I know you had a conversation earlier today on FreightWaves Now, kind of talking about kind of what this peak season is and what it might not be, right? That kind of less than peak season. And I mean, the show wouldn't be complete without bringing up some Sonar charts here to start off. We'll bring up the first one. It'll be our Outbound Tender Volume Index, and we can kind of see, so in the white line, you'll have this year's levels. The green line, you'll have 2020, orange line, 2021, and the blue line there, 2019. And what you can see, we're really close to 2019 levels, and we've been declining. I think that's the concerning part. I mean, Thomas, what do you have to say about when you see kind of freight demand by the OTVI here declining as we enter the fourth quarter?
Well, I think it's fascinating because we all talk about the narrative where the consumer, and how the consumer impacts freight demand. And so you almost see that February and March, beginning of Q1, where we started seeing the rise in energy prices, overall macro trends. And so, freight volumes are very much beholden to it. If you're spending less, you're changing from goods to services. That's what's so fascinating about this OTVI index, because like you said, we're now approaching levels towards like 2019. And so, moving forward, this is traditionally the part where we'd want to see that number move upwards, not downwards, because there should be traditionally in the fourth quarter, a peak season. And so that's the concerning part, is where are we going to go from there? And as well, what is that going to mean for trucking companies? Because we're still going to see activity, but we're not going to see as much activity as there is needed to keep up with all this truckload supply.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, really, Donnie and I have talked about it during carrier updates. You start to think of that October 15th. So what is that, Saturday of this week, where you really start to see what's going to be coming in the fourth quarter. Are we going to see that kind of uptick in freight demand that's going into the fourth quarter rush where, I mean, obviously you've got retail, you touched on it, the consumer. The big consumer spending holidays are right in front of us, and we're not seeing those impacts of demand just. It is that time. We are joined right now by Andrew Leto, founder and CEO of Emerge. Andrew, how are you doing? Can't hear Andrew, but we'll get him on here in just a second. And I mean, he'll bring in all sorts of knowledge of what we're seeing and these trends and kind of how technology is changing the freight environment as a whole. So we'll bring him in. Andrew, how are you doing?
Good. How's it going?
Great to have you on here. I mean, we've talked about this a lot recently here at FreightWaves, specifically kind of in this changing freight environment, and the market dynamics are shifting pretty heavily. I mean, when you think about where we've been in the previous 2 years with this boom cycle where you see record demand, record spot rates, things like that. Now it's kind of transitioning back the other way. I mean, how do you see this, and how do these traditional pain points that shippers, carriers, brokers, everybody in this freight market ecosystem, like what are these pain points that they're feeling right now? How do they during this transition? I mean, you've got plenty of experience throughout the years. I mean, founding Global Trans, now Emerge, 10-4 as well. I mean, there's all these, you've seen it from all sides.
Yeah, no, the way we see it now, merge is obviously we're building the RFP for trucking.
Yep.
RFP and procurement really wasn't focused on by technology until we came up with our platform 5 years ago. And I've never seen in the last 5 months such a transition from being a carrier market back to a shipper market that quick. Tender rejections, as you were talking about earlier, are not a thing anymore. It was 20-30% of a shipper's volume only 4 or 5 months ago. Now it's back down to normal levels, maybe even better than it's ever been as far as rejections. And contract carriers are eating that up. The spot market's getting crushed as far as for small mid-sized carriers that relied on the spot market. And shippers are running more bids than ever. And we call it, I think one of my guys call it, in a sense, it's kind of like revenge of the shippers right now on what they experienced the last 2 years when COVID hit, after COVID, and the demand for trucks and freight went sky high, and we're back into a shipper market. So shippers are running more bids than ever, and not the year-long bid cycle like they used to, but running shorter-term bids because they want to see where the market's going to be in three to 6 months.
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a great point where they're running more bids and they're these shorter duration bids. I mean, is that something that, even prior to like previous big boom cycles? I mean, if you think 2017 into 2018, where was another kind of boom cycle, then you followed by 2019, it didn't seem like that was necessarily the case then. Like these shorter term bids have always, I guess, been a thing, but they've not been as prevalent. I mean, have you noticed that that's been definitely an area of focus for these shippers moving forward with this change that we're seeing in the market?
Yeah, like for instance, there used to be, when people say the RFP is dead, I say, the annual RFP right now, I think should be dead for a shipper, because why would you want to lock in rates? You don't know if it could even go lower. And traditionally, it's actually not if you have drop on both sides, it makes sense. But if you have a live situation as a shipper, you should really be taking advantage of running shorter bid term cycles, because everybody could sharpen their pencils, even your carriers, especially your brokers, when you run a shorter bid cycle. And so we try to push our shippers. Right now we have 20 billion of the for-hire trucking being bid on a merge platform. And we built it so you can run a shorter term bid cycle. And traditionally, if you're using spreadsheets and email for doing your bids, what most shippers are still doing, or they're not using, or they're using a Coupa or a Jagger, they're not really built for the short term 3 to 6 month bid cycle. And that's where I think we're moving towards. And it's smart for shippers right now to be taking advantage of that, getting ahead of it and running short. If you could possibly run shorter term bid cycle, because again, your carriers and everybody can do much better and you can take advantage of the rates right now, and start saving money on what you're paying. If you're running contract rates from 6-7 months ago, you're overpaying by 30%. So we're trying to get shippers to understand that and run a quicker bid cycle if they can. I always say you should be benchmarking all your lanes. Always, look at what you're paying. Use companies like Sonar to benchmark and find out how you're paying towards the market. And then once you see what you're paying, pick the lanes that you're overpaying on and run a short-term bid cycle, if you could, on those lanes. And that's what I feel like shippers are the ones that are taking advantage of it are doing that right now. And historically, they would run a longer-term bid cycle, but or try to keep what we call evergreen rates with their carriers. But right now, if you have any rates that you haven't run in the last 6 months, you should definitely take advantage of it right now.
Looking into that, live versus drop on the lanes. I thought you brought up such a great point. I was sticking in my brain right there. Was getting brokerages and carriers on live and pushing back. Have you seen anything, especially with the merge and doing RFPs? Has there been resiliency on the drop lanes in terms of contracted rate reductions compared to the live ones, or are we seeing kind of an across the board decline in these contracted bids?
Well, it's across the board. Even the drop trailer, big larger carriers know that they're lucky to be locking in. If they're getting a rate right now, they want to lock in. Carriers are scrambling to lock in rates if they can. But yeah, we've seen a decline of rates for both drop trailer shipper or carriers, and also same thing as live. We haven't seen really a difference there. But yeah, I think I'm trying to get shippers to understand, like, you should try to take advantage right now. If you can, look at your whole book of business before, benchmark before you go to bid. Pick the lanes that you're overpaying at least by 20%, 10 to 20%, which if you haven't run a bid in like the last 6 months, you are. And then go to your carriers and take care of your carriers that have taken care of you to also during when things were, the last 2 years. And shippers really know that. They'll know the carriers that really took care of them when rates went sky high in the last 2 years. Give them give them the first right of refusal on the rate drops, but you should still go try to get a market rate on majority of your lanes.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my question is, how receptive have shippers been to this? I mean, you would think after the past 2 years, I mean, they would be willing to kind of go this route to try to lock in or try to take advantage of the market, how it is right now. But there's also things that come with that, right? I mean, you talked about it. If you're trying to do it on spreadsheets and things like that, it doesn't really make sense. Using technology makes it a little quicker, but have they been more willing to adopt this after paying the rates?
Yeah, more than ever. Like, it was, when I first started Emerge in 2017, it was hard to get shippers to want to talk to us because everything was really on there. You had a 5% rejection rate. Most of my network was running fine, and all of a sudden COVID hit, and demand for trucking went sky high, and then shippers had to start running more bids than ever. But right now, that when that started happening, we started seeing uptick. But this year we've seen the biggest uptick we've ever seen. We started the year at $3 billion running through our platform of bids. Now we're up to 20 of shipper of the $350 to $400 billion for-hire trucking market. And I've never seen, like, we're getting shippers finally calling us and saying, hey, we want to run a bid. We want to start running a shorter term bid cycle, like we've been hearing that we should be doing. And we've been seeing just a huge uptick of shipper, being receptive to running a bid. Because again, if you're running trucks that you haven't got a rate on in the last 6 months, you're definitely overpaying. Even if it's been a long-term relationship with that carrier. And we say you should respect that and respect your carrier, but you should definitely tell them, hey, listen, the market, this is what the market's at. This is what we're seeing. Use benchmarking. Give your carriers, the benefit that have helped you. But still, we've seen, like, I've never seen this before, where we're actually, like I said, we started the year with only 3 billion of shippers doing this. Now we're up to 20. And that's just been because, there's a big need right now to go out there and see what the market's bearing.
Kind of a chicken or the egg question. Do you want to, if you're building a load platform, the carriers first or the shippers first? I remember in trucking, the old joke was you find yourself a shipper and you give them enough trucks to fulfill the demand. When you're building the load board, you're doing the RFPs, does it matter more heavily on the shippers? Or if you have an abundance of carriers, will shippers naturally try to come on?
Oh, no, we're a shipper focused technology. So we go give our product to the shipper. Most shippers don't have, remember, the TMS is why we've been successful is the TMS providers typically never, when you have a TMS, the top ones, they don't have a good procurement platform. They're a great execution layer, but so you've had to either run your bids on spreadsheets. And if you're using those, then, you're obviously, you can't run it. Think about this. If you're trying to do a short-term bid cycle with just using spreadsheets and email, you're not going to do that. It's a hard process to do. And you have to really have a technology to be able to go to a 3 to 6 month shorter-term bid cycle on your contract rate. And, that's where we've been successful, by getting shippers to get off of these spreadsheets and email situations, and then integrating. And then I always say this: I think benchmarking is the first thing, though, always. And benchmark, find out where you need to run the bids, then go run where you should go run. Where you're overpaying, and then give your carriers the benefits that helped you out during the bad times. But still let those carriers know, hey, here's where the market rate is. Can you get close to it or match it? If you can't, then go see what's out there, because carriers right now need freight. There's abundance of capacity out there. Even the spot market carriers are trying to get back to the contract market. So there's a big carrier. So it's for us, it's the shipper first, and that's where we if you have the freight and if the freight's there, the carriers will come. So that's what we say. And, right now, more than ever, carriers need your freight. So put it out there for bid. That's what we're telling the shippers.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely something. When we just look at it in our data, right, it says the same thing, or it kind of reinforces that idea of, hey, these things are changing. Shippers, this is an area where you can kind of take advantage. And take advantage, maybe not the right word, but it's an area where this has been a pain point for 2 years now, and now that pressure on, their budgets is starting to alleviate itself. Now you have to do that, and transportation managers were losing their. They were getting just killed because rates went up so fast. Well, now they've come down just as fast. Especially on the spot market side, if you look at that decline. You talked about it, that 3 to 6 month mini or shorter bid cycle. Is there any risk there for these shippers that, hey, if we run a bid that's for 6 months, well, the market could leave us in the dust, kind of like it did both up and down?
Yeah, the best thing to do is no one has a crystal ball to know, but if you feel like the rates are about to go up, and I know you guys have some products where you could see how the rates are trending, but if we feel like it's going to go back to a carrier market, that's the only time you should start considering 12-month long cycles, because you could lock those rates in. Obviously, you need to have good carrier partners to do that. Otherwise, you'll have what shippers call paper rates. And, that's what happened to a lot of shippers when the downturn happened, or the freight market went crazy and there was abundance of freight and not enough trucks. And all of a sudden, what you thought was you had your rates locked in weren't actually locked in. But shippers know those carriers and brokers that didn't hold the rates. So I would say, try to run a shorter term bid cycle right now, because I don't think the rates are going to go up dramatically in the next 3 to 6 months. But if you feel like all of a sudden we're about to go into a back to what it was, and demand's going to be sky high, and you're going to be scrambling, carrier and rejections start to happen, that's when you should definitely try to lock in a longer term bid. But that's the only time you should do it. So most of the time, think about this, most of the time, you should always be running 3 to 6 months, because again, even asset-based carriers have to bake in, because they have owner-operators, they have to be aware of what the prices are, what they're going to be in 6 months. So they're going to have to bake in, if you're asking for a year-long contract from a carrier, they have to bake in a little higher rate. If you're asking for shorter-term contracts, it's much better, because everybody could sharpen their pencil more. Your carriers and brokers could take that risk of a 3 to 6 month contract and hold the rate much better than if you're asking for a year-long rate. But when rates start going up again and you feel like they're about to go up, that's when you should consider running a longer-term bid. But I think the right way to do it moving forward for shippers is to benchmark your lanes using a benchmark platform, like what you guys have, and figure out which lanes I'm overpaying on and which lane, I think shippers have a 3, 6, and 12-month bid cycle. 12 months on some of their lanes, 6 months on some of their lanes, and 3 months on some of their lanes. They should have a 3-month bid on lanes they feel like the rates are going. We don't know. It looks like they're kind of trending downwards. So why lock a rate in for 6 months if you feel rates are still trending downwards a little bit on that lane? But if you feel like rates are going up in these lanes, run more of a 6 or 12-month bid. That's the only time you should be running a longer-term bid, if you could get ahead of that.
Awesome stuff, Andrew. Thank you so much for joining us. Where can people go to find out more about what's happening over at Emerge? Yeah,
so Emerge has a platform that you can run short-term, long-term bids, like what I just mentioned. We have an RFP platform. It's emergemarket.com. And we would love to have you and be your procurement platform, because I feel like the biggest missing piece of technology in any shipper supply chain tech stack is, every shipper has an execution layer, which is the TMS. But if you ask shippers, how do you go find, source, award, benchmark, all that stuff? The answer is usually spreadsheets and email, or platforms that are for all types of procurement, not just for trucking. So we're a freight specific platform, and emergemarket.com. We'd love to have you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us. We'll be sure to check it out.
Appreciate it.
Thomas, great stuff there from Andrew. Obviously, a lot of awesome things happening over at Emerge. guess what's coming up in a few weeks where I know where Emerge will be? F3, right here in the heart of Chattanooga, Tennessee. They'll be here, obviously, 3 days of Future Freight Festival. Obviously, going to take over the city of Chattanooga. If you haven't booked your ticket, now's the time to do it. The last chance sale is happening right now. Get those tickets right now before they go back up to their full price. Also, if you have your ticket and you haven't booked a room, go ahead and do that because there aren't that many hotel rooms available here in Chattanooga. It isn't like in Atlanta, but there are plenty. You just have to act now. Thomas, I mean, awesome stuff. What are you looking forward to most about F3 coming up in, what is it, just about 2 weeks, 3 weeks?
Definitely looking forward to. I like the little events that they have where you can go look at all the booths. Whenever I do manage to get out of work, that was my favorite thing to do in Arkansas, just because there's so many people showing off. Like you'll hear about the big ones, the top like 15, and you'll see these people like hidden in a corner with this crazy technology. And you're like, man, and then you got to search for their swag and try to snag some of that as well. So it's a great opportunity. I also like the networking aspect. It's my first year at FreightWaves, and there's so many people. You'll recognize some familiar faces, and it's a wonderful time just because, when you're stuck working in a cubicle, you forget there's this whole outside world of freight. And so looking forward to it. And axe throwing, top 3.
Absolutely. I mean, Thomas, there was great stuff from Andrew. I mean, obviously, the RFP process, I mean, if we'll bring up a sonar chart here that kind of just shows how carriers have reacted. I mean, falling back into that compliance. You see here our outbound tender rejection index. We'll pull it up real quick. It's at 5.05%. It is the new, if you want to call it cycle low, right? The lowest it's been since May of 2020. And I mean, this is why, if you look at that sharp decline there in that white line, it's why shippers are falling back into this kind of, hey, carriers are trying to take rates right now that shippers bid on 12 months ago, and they're running it right now because those rates are really attractive, especially when you start comparing them to rates now. So, I mean, everything you're saying is spot on, especially when this is a time when shippers can push the rates down because you see rejections at 5%. I mean, we're talking 95% compliance on loads.
Exactly. And from even a trucking standpoint, 5% is that's becoming, in my opinion, when we see seasonality, the cyclical market, if you're at a 95% tender acceptance rate for most of the time, you should be okay. Now, the challenge is going to be that now that it's a shipper's market, back in the day when the market's for the carrier, you got your lanes and they'll say, I want 99% EDI tender compliance. And then you'll say, okay, well, I'm only going to take 80% because I have no trucks. Well, now the market has shifted. Look at that. We're at 5% rejection rate. They're going to say, oh, you're at like 90%. I'm going to go find my secondary carrier. I'm going to tender it to them because they're actually at a 98% tender compliance. So I'm going to assume they have the extra capacity. Those are the cool trends that you have to worry about operationally speaking, because, the two big questions I'm seeing is, one, just like in politics, will there be an October surprise before F3? Will tenders go below 4 or 3%? And then the second situation is going to be, how are shippers going to take advantage of this? Emerge had a great point, and I think no one's really appreciated until I looked at a JCI Excel spreadsheet that had 12,000 lanes. There was a poor pricing analyst there, and it took him 6 weeks to figure out how to quote them. And, it's literally with emails. So, RFP strategies and stuff, shippers need to take advantage of it, but a lot of times it's like you're trying to run a race with your shoes tied. You're tripping over yourself because internally your operations cannot support the functions for you to reprice your lanes in a timely manner, and you're going to miss out. And the carriers are basically saying, whew, I'm catching a break on this. I'm keeping that high contract rate, and they can't close the gap.
Absolutely. I mean, I think you hit the nail on the head right there. Thomas, where can people go look to learn more about you? Since you're not a regular here on With Sonar, but you are a regular on the FreightWaves airwaves, what are you working on? What can people look for from you coming out soon?
Definitely got the Loaded and Rolling newsletter coming out. I have the Loaded and Rolling community, so just freightwaves.com, Loaded and Rolling. It should be on there somewhere. Also on TV, have the podcast. I've been out sick, so we'll have new, fresher stuff coming up, moving in, as well as some folks from MIT. Going to talk some freight science, get hyped, get excited. But it's always fun being able to help out with FreightWaves as well, just being in the media and stuff, talking about all this fun, fascinating information. So I recommend everybody check it out as well. Freightwaves.com/loaded and rolling. It's a wild ride.
Yeah, with you, it's always a wild ride. But Thomas, thank you so much for joining me on this edition of With Sonar. We'll be sure to check in with you soon. That'll do it for this week's edition. We'll be back next week again at 3:30. Luke should be back in the driver's seat here. But right now, we'll send it out. That'll do it. Thanks, everybody.